Reports are now flooding in from multiple credible sources, and they all point in the same devastating direction. Meghan Markle is not just distancing herself from Prince Harry. She is reportedly refusing intimacy, operating as a separate entity in virtually every professional and personal capacity, and according to some of the most explosive claims yet, she may have been planning her exit since before the ink dried on the marriage certificate. The alleged timeline: 10 years. Marry in 2018, divorce by 2028, and then the piece de resistance, the victim memoir to end all victim memoirs. Buckle in. This is going to take a while. Let's start with what we can observe, not speculation, not rumor, observable, documented, verifiable reality. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have not been seen together at a public event in a manner that suggests genuine marital harmony in quite some time. Now, before anyone rushes to the comments section to tell me that couples don't need to be joined at the hip, let me be very clear. I agree with that entirely. Healthy couples absolutely maintain their own identities and pursuits, but that's not what we're seeing here, is it? What we're seeing is something far more telling. We're seeing a systematic divergence, a careful, deliberate, almost surgical separation of brand identities. Meghan has her new lifestyle venture. Her Netflix cooking show, filmed tellingly without Harry. Her podcast ambitions. Her celebrity friendship circle and those angels that seems to rotate based entirely on whoever is most useful at any given moment. And where is Harry during all of this? Where is the Duke of Sussex while his wife courts Hollywood and positions herself as some sort of wellness guru meets humanitarian meets lifestyle empress? He's at home. Or he's at a polo match. Or he's giving yet another interview where he looks, and I choose this word carefully, haunted. Have you watched Harry's recent public appearances? Really watched them. The man who once radiated charisma, who was known as the fun prince, the relatable royal, that man looks like he's been hollowed out from the inside. His eyes have a flatness to them. His smile, when it appears, doesn't reach beyond his mouth. He speaks in careful, measured phrases that sound less like authentic expression, and more like a man who has been coached to within an inch of his life about what he can and cannot say. Prince Harry has, by several accounts, begun to break his silence about the state of his marriage, not through grand proclamations or tell-all interviews, but through the far more revealing medium of what he doesn't say. The pauses, the deflections. The moments where a question about Meghan is met with a redirect, so clumsy it practically screams for help in semaphore. And this brings us to a concept that several commentators, including some with genuine psychological expertise, have begun to raise: spousal alienation. Spousal alienation is a term that deserves careful handling, because it describes something genuinely serious. It refers to a dynamic within a marriage where one partner is systematically isolated from their support systems, family, friends, colleagues, familiar environments, until they become entirely dependent on the alienating spouse. Let's review the checklist, shall we? Family relationships severed. Check. Harry's relationship with his father, King Charles, has been reduced to what appears to be strained, infrequent contact. His relationship with his brother, Prince William, the person who was by all accounts his closest confidant for 3 decades, is, by Harry's own admission, virtually non-existent. His relationship with his extended family, gone. Catherine, who reportedly made genuine efforts to welcome Meghan, estranged. The cousins he grew up with, distant at best, old friendships dissolved. Check. Where are Harry's old friends? Tom Inskip, who reportedly warned Harry about moving too fast and was subsequently frozen out of his life entirely. So many members of his former social circle have simply vanished. The friends who knew Harry before Meghan have, one by one, been replaced by Meghan's network, or they've simply been discarded like last season's wardrobe, removed from familiar environments. Harry doesn't just live in another country. He lives in a gated compound in Montecito, California, about as far from the world he knew, geographically and culturally, as it is possible to get while still remaining in the English-speaking world. He has been physically removed from every anchor point of his former life, professional independence undermined. Check. Every venture Harry has attempted, from his work with BetterUp to his involvement with various charitable causes, has somehow become entangled with or overshadowed by Meghan's parallel pursuits. He doesn't appear to have a single professional endeavor that is entirely and authentically his own. Even Spare, his memoir, his story, his life, was ghostwritten, and many have speculated, heavily influenced by considerations that weren't entirely Harry's own. Now, I want to be measured here. I am not a psychologist. I am not diagnosing anyone. What I am doing is laying out a pattern and inviting you to draw your own conclusions. Because when you look at the totality of what has happened to Prince Harry over the past 6 years, the pattern is rather difficult to ignore. And now we come to perhaps the most personal, and let's be honest, the most tabloid-grabbing element of this entire saga. The reports, and they are coming from multiple outlets now, not just one or two, suggest that Meghan has been refusing physical intimacy with Harry. Now, let me be the first to say that what happens in any couple's bedroom is their private affair. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't touch this topic with a ceremonial barge pole, but these are not normal circumstances, are they? These are two people who have made their private life the single most public commodity in the global media marketplace. They sold their love story to Netflix. They sold their grievances to Oprah. They sold Harry's most intimate childhood memories and adult experiences to a publishing house for a reported $20 million advance. So when reports emerge about the state of their physical relationship, they have, by their own relentless monetization of their private lives, forfeited the right to claim that this is nobody's business. You cannot sell every chapter of your story and then demand the public skip the uncomfortable pages. The refusal of intimacy, if these reports are accurate, fits a pattern that is deeply concerning. It suggests a marriage that has moved from partnership to transaction. A relationship where emotional and physical closeness has been replaced by strategic positioning. And it raises an uncomfortable but necessary question. Is Harry still in this marriage because he wants to be, or because he doesn't know how to leave? Because leaving would mean admitting that the people he abandoned were right all along. It would mean acknowledging that the family he publicly savaged, his father, his brother, his stepmother, his late grandmother's institution, they weren't the villains of this story. And that admission, that would be a reckoning from which Harry's self-constructed narrative might never recover. Which brings us to the most incendiary allegation of all. And I want to be very precise about how I present this because it is an allegation. It is a claim made by multiple commentators and sources in royal circles, and while I cannot independently verify it, the circumstantial architecture supporting it is considerable. The claim is this: Meghan Markle entered her marriage with Prince Harry with a predetermined exit strategy. The timeline allegedly discussed, whether by Meghan herself or by those advising her, was approximately 10 years. Marry in 2018. Build the brand. Extract maximum value from the royal connection. Produce heirs to maintain a permanent biological link to the House of Windsor. And then, around 2028, initiate a divorce, but not just any divorce. A sympathetic divorce. A divorce in which Meghan emerges not as the woman who dismantled a prince, but as the brave survivor who endured one. The victim. The long-suffering wife who tried everything, who gave everything, who sacrificed everything, and who finally had no choice but to walk away for her own well-being and that of her children. And then the book, the real book, Harry's book, her book, the definitive account. The inside story of being married to a royal told from the perspective of the woman who lived it, suffered through it, and heroically overcame it. If you think this sounds far-fetched, I invite you to consider the following. Meghan's first marriage to Trevor Engelson lasted approximately 2 years. According to multiple accounts, including from Engelson's own friends, Meghan ended the relationship abruptly once her career began to gain traction through Suits. The wedding rings were reportedly returned in the post, not in person, in the post. The callousness of that single detail tells you everything you need to know about how Meghan Markle processes the end of relationships that have ceased to serve their purpose. Now consider the trajectory since marrying Harry. The Oprah interview, a carefully orchestrated media event designed to establish Meghan as a victim of institutional racism and callousness. The Netflix documentary, 6 hours of curated narrative, designed to reinforce that victimhood while simultaneously humanizing Meghan and dehumanizing the institution she married into. Spare Harry's memoir that somehow managed to damage Harry's relationships and reputation far more than it damaged anyone else's, while conveniently positioning Meghan as the supportive, long-suffering wife standing loyally by her man. Every single move has built the foundation for one narrative and one narrative only. Meghan the survivor. The 10-year timeline allows for the children to reach an age where custody arrangements become a powerful leverage point. It allows for California's community property laws to apply with maximum financial impact. It allows for the accumulation of enough material, enough grievances, enough anecdotes, enough private moments repurposed as public trauma to fill a memoir that would be, without question, the most commercially valuable divorce tale, all in publishing history. You want to know what the book advance would look like? Conservative estimates put it north of $35 million. The serialization rights, the interview circuit, the documentary adaptation, we're talking about a divorce that could be worth upwards of $100 million if managed correctly. And if there's one thing we know about Meghan Markle, it's that she manages things correctly. I want to pause here and say something that might surprise regular viewers of this channel. I feel sorry for Prince Harry, not the Harry who sat across from Oprah and accused his family of racism with the flimsiest of evidence. Not the Harry who wrote Spare and humiliated his brother, his stepmother, and the memory of every relationship he ever had. Not the Harry who stood on American soil and lectured the British public about duty and service while having abandoned both. I feel sorry for the Harry who existed before all of that, the boy who walked behind his mother's coffin, the young man who served in Afghanistan with genuine courage. The prince who created the Invictus Games, a project of authentic compassion and real value. That Harry deserved better than this, because if the allegations we've discussed today bear any resemblance to reality, then Harry is not the co-author of his own destruction. He's the raw material. He was identified, targeted, and systematically processed by someone who understood his vulnerabilities better than he understood them himself. His mother wound, his resentment toward the press, his complicated relationship with his father, his feeling of being the spare, the second son, the afterthought. Every single one of these pressure points was, if the pattern holds, leverage to separate him from everyone who might have said, "Harry, slow down, think about this, something isn't right." And now he sits in a mansion in Montecito, thousands of miles from home, estranged from his family, watching his wife build a career that increasingly doesn't include him, and facing the very real possibility that when the end comes, and the evidence suggests it is coming, he will have nothing, no family to return to, no friendships to fall back on, no institution to shelter him, just a very expensive house in a very sunny place that has never, ever felt like home. But where does this leave us? Where does this leave Harry? And where does this leave the monarchy? If the 2028 timeline is accurate, and I stress again, this is alleged, then we are currently in what might be called the quiet separation phase, the period where the groundwork is being laid, where the public is being gently acclimatized to the idea that Harry and Meghan are individuals with separate paths, where the word divorce starts appearing in headlines not as scandal, but as inevitability, where sympathies are carefully managed so that when the announcement comes, it feels less like a bomb and more like a mercy. Meghan's current professional moves support this reading entirely. She is building a brand that is explicitly, intentionally, and unmistakably independent of Harry. The cooking show, the lifestyle brand, the celebrity friendships. None of these require a prince. None of these are enhanced by a husband who carries the baggage of a family feud that the American public, frankly, grows less interested in by the day. Harry's becoming surplus to requirements. And the terrible irony is that he may be the last person to realize it. The British monarchy has survived civil wars, abdications, world wars, scandals, and centuries of political upheaval. It will survive Harry and Meghan. The institution is, if anything, stronger for their departure, because it exposed a truth about the monarchy that even its critics must acknowledge. The institution endures not because of any single individual, but because of the principle it represents: continuity, duty, service above self. Meghan Markle understood the power of that institution better than anyone gives her credit for. She understood it well enough to know exactly how much of it she could extract for personal gain. She understood the market value of a royal title, a royal wedding, and a royal grievance. But what she may not have understood, what her carefully constructed plans may not have accounted for, is that the British public has a very long memory, and they do not forgive those who exploit their own. The clock is ticking toward 2028. The manuscript is, metaphorically if not literally, already being written. And Prince Harry, the boy who lost his mother, the soldier who served his country, the prince who wanted nothing more than to be loved, may wake up one morning to discover that the greatest love story of his generation was nothing more than a 10-year business plan with a very expensive exit clause. And on that day I suspect the phone at Kensington Palace will ring. And I genuinely hope that someone will answer it. It is a compelling narrative. It is emotionally resonant. It has been told with considerable skill across multiple platforms and multiple formats, and it has found a genuinely receptive audience, particularly in certain corners of American media culture where the British monarchy is viewed through a post-colonial lens that frames virtually every conflict as a story of institutional whiteness versus individual black excellence. I understand why that narrative exists. I understand why people believe it. I even understand, to a degree, why it was constructed. But here is what I cannot do. I cannot look at the evidence that has accumulated over the past several years and pretend that the narrative holds together. Because it doesn't. Not when you examine it closely. Not when you follow the money, the timing, the decisions, and the outcomes. Not when you look at who has benefited from every single development in this saga and ask yourself, consistently and honestly, who wins here? The answer every single time is the same person. Let's talk about the professional separation first, because it is the most visible and in many ways the most telling element of where this marriage currently stands. Meghan Markle's lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, launched with considerable fanfare and considerable strategic calculation. The name itself is instructive. It is rooted entirely in her California identity, her post-royal life, her independent persona. There is nothing in that name that connects to Harry, nothing that references their shared journey, nothing that acknowledges the partnership that she spent 6 years publicly presenting as the central relationship of her life. Her Netflix cooking and lifestyle show was filmed in their Montecito home, but was, to all observable evidence, Harry's home only in the technical sense that his name is presumably on the mortgage. He appeared briefly, peripherally in the manner of a pleasant but largely irrelevant background fixture. He was there the way a nice piece of furniture is there, present, inoffensive, and entirely decorative. Her podcast ventures, her celebrity cultivation, her carefully choreographed friendships with like Mindy Kaling and others in the Hollywood firmament, all of these have been executed with a precision and an intentionality that is frankly impressive if you can bring yourself to admire the craftsmanship while deploring the purpose. Every element of Meghan's current public identity is being constructed around a single, unifying message. I don't need him. I never needed the institution. I am the story. I was always the story. And the question that this raises, the question that nobody in the mainstream media seems particularly eager to ask, is, what does Harry think about all of this? What does a man who abandoned his family, his country, his career, and his entire identity for a woman feel when he watches that woman methodically build a life in which he is increasingly optional? Because here's the thing about Harry that tends to get lost in the noise. He is not a stupid man. He is not, despite the impression sometimes given by his public statements, an unsophisticated man. He grew up in one of the most complex and scrutinized families on earth. He served in the military. He built the Invictus Games from nothing into a genuinely remarkable international institution. He is a man of real capability and, at his best, real compassion, which means he can see what is happening. On some level, conscious or otherwise, he can see it. And the question of what that awareness is doing to him, what it costs a person to watch the life they sacrificed everything for dissolve into a lifestyle brand and a cooking show, that question is written all over his face every time he appears in public. Watch him, just watch him. Not with the agenda of finding evidence for a predetermined conclusion, but with genuine attention. Watch the way he holds his body. Watch the way he responds to questions. Watch the micro-expressions that flicker across his face in the moments between the managed smile and the careful answer. There is something happening inside Prince Harry that press releases and polo matches and brief public appearances cannot conceal. There is a man in there who is deeply, profoundly, existentially lost. And the tragedy, the genuine, heartbreaking tragedy, is that he lost himself so thoroughly, so completely, that he may not even fully remember who he was before. Now let us talk about what several commentators with genuine expertise in relationship psychology have raised as a framework for understanding the Harry and Meghan dynamic. The concept of spousal alienation is not a fringe idea. It is a recognized pattern of behavior that psychologists and family law specialists encounter regularly, and it operates through a set of mechanisms that are consistent, predictable, and remarkably effective. The first mechanism is isolation. The targeted partner is gradually, systematically separated from their existing support network. This doesn't happen overnight, and it rarely happens through obvious confrontation. It happens through subtle commentary, questions raised about the loyalty or the motives of the targeted partner's friends and family, situations engineered to create conflict and distance. A gentle but persistent narrative that positions the outside world as threatening, judgmental, or unsafe, and positions the alienating partner as the only truly safe harbor. Consider Harry's trajectory. His closest friendships evaporated. His relationship with William, which by all historical accounts was one of the most important relationships of his life, was poisoned through a series of incidents that Harry himself has described in ways that seem, on close examination, oddly one-sided. His relationship with his father deteriorated from warmth to formality, to what now appears to be near estrangement punctuated by brief and carefully managed contact. His relationship with every institution that once defined his life, the military, the monarchy, the charitable sector in which he had built genuine credibility, all of it gone. All of it dismantled. All of it replaced with a life in California that revolves entirely around Meghan's orbit. The second mechanism is dependency creation. Once the targeted partner's external support network has been sufficiently dismantled, they become entirely dependent on the alienating partner for emotional sustenance, social connection, and identity affirmation. They lose the capacity for independent self-assessment because every mirror they might have used to check their own reflection has been removed. The only mirror left is the one held by the alienating partner, who controls what it shows. Harry's sense of self in his post-royal life has been almost entirely constructed through the lens of Meghan's narrative. He is the awakened prince, the man who saw through the institution, the brave soul who chose love over duty. These are not descriptions Harry arrived at independently. These are descriptions that emerged from a very particular storytelling framework that has been managed with extraordinary consistency and considerable professional support. And the third mechanism, the one that experts say is perhaps the most psychologically devastating, is intermittent reinforcement. This is the pattern where the alienating partner alternates between warmth and withdrawal, between intimacy and coldness, in a cycle that is unpredictable enough to keep the targeted partner constantly anxious, constantly seeking approval, constantly working to recapture closeness that is deliberately made to feel just out of reach. The reports about Meghan refusing physical intimacy with Harry, and again, these come from multiple sources with enough consistency to demand serious consideration rather than dismissal, fit this third mechanism with uncomfortable precision. Physical withdrawal in a relationship is not simply an intimate matter. It is a power dynamic. It communicates with devastating clarity and without a single word being spoken. You are not in control here. I am. And I can withhold what you need whenever it suits me. For a man already stripped of his family, his country, his career, and his identity, the withdrawal of physical intimacy from the one relationship he sacrificed everything to protect would be, I don't use this word lightly, annihilating. But let us pull back from the psychological and return to the strategic. Because if there is one thing that the observable evidence demands we acknowledge, it is that Meghan Markle operates with a level of strategic discipline that is genuinely extraordinary. The claim that has been circulating in royal commentary circles, that Meghan entered this marriage with a predetermined 10-year exit timeline, is one that I have seen dismissed by some as too cynical, too cold-blooded, too Machiavellian to be credible. To those people I would gently suggest, have you been paying attention? Think about what a 10-year plan actually looks like when you break it down into its component parts. You marry in 2018. In the first phase, you establish legitimacy. You are the royal wife, you are part of the institution, you are making it work. In the second phase, you begin the process of building grievances, cataloging real and perceived slights, establishing a public record of being mistreated, laying the groundwork for the victimhood narrative. In the third phase, you execute the departure. You leave with Harry, you frame it as escape rather than abandonment. You secure the Netflix deal, the book deals, the opera interview that plants the flag of your victimhood definitively in the global consciousness. In the fourth phase, and this is where we are now, you build the independent brand. You make yourself commercially viable as an individual rather than as half of a couple. You subtly shift the cultural conversation from Sussex as a unit to Meghan as an individual. You lay the financial and professional groundwork for a life that does not require a husband. And in the fifth phase, which the alleged timeline places around 2028, you execute the exit. You divorce. You do so in a jurisdiction with community property laws that will ensure maximum financial settlement. You do so at a moment when your children are old enough for their own perspectives to carry legal and emotional weight in custody proceedings. And you do so with an autobiography already drafted, the story of a woman who loved, who suffered, who endured, and who finally found the courage to choose herself. That book, the post-divorce memoir, would be the most commercially explosive publication of the decade. Publishers would engage in a bidding war that would make the advances paid for spare look like pocket change. The television rights alone would be worth tens of millions. The interview circuit, the podcast, the Netflix documentary about the divorce, we are talking about a financial harvest so substantial, independently wealthy on a scale that would make the royal family connection a footnote rather than a foundation. And here is the darkest part of all of this. The darker Harry's period becomes, the more visibly he struggles, the more publicly he unravels, the more desperate and lost he appears, the richer the material becomes. His suffering, if we are being completely unsentimental about it, is commercially valuable. A divorce from a prince who is visibly broken is worth considerably more than a divorce from a prince who is thriving. I need to talk about Trevor Engelson, because Trevor Engelson matters to this conversation more than most people seem to realize. Meghan's first husband was, by virtually all accounts, a decent man who loved her genuinely and supported her career at a time when she was still a relatively unknown actress hustling for roles. He championed her. He believed in her. He reportedly helped connect her with the opportunities that eventually led to her casting in Suits. And when Suits happened, when Meghan's career trajectory shifted and the horizons of what was possible for her expanded, Trevor Engelson became unnecessary. The relationship ended with a speed and a coldness that shocked people who knew them both. The wedding rings returned by post has become something of a notorious detail in discussions of Meghan's character, and perhaps it has been overemphasized. But it cannot be entirely dismissed, because it speaks to something about how Meghan Markle experiences the end of utility. There is no evidence of prolonged grief. No evidence of the kind of agonized reckoning that most people experience when a marriage ends. What there is evidence of is efficiency. a clean severance, a rapid pivot toward the next chapter. If you are inclined to give the most charitable interpretation, you might say that Meghan is simply someone who processes endings quickly and moves forward without looking back. Some people are built that way, and there is nothing inherently sinister about it. But if you place that pattern of behavior alongside everything else we have discussed today, the systematic isolation of Harry, the construction of a grievance narrative, the independent brand building, the alleged withdrawal of intimacy, the 10-year timeline, then Trevor Engelson starts to look less like chapter 1 of a love story and more like a pilot episode, a proof of concept, evidence that the methodology works. And Harry starts to look less like the great love of Meghan Markle's life, and more like a significantly more ambitious iteration of the same basic model. Here is what I believe, and I want to be clear that this is opinion rather than established fact. I believe that somewhere in the course of the past several years, Prince Harry has begun to understand, not consciously perhaps, not in the full and devastating clarity that understanding would require, but on some level, in some quiet part of himself that he cannot fully silence, that something is very wrong. I believe the public appearances that look haunted are haunted. I believe the careful answers and the managed smiles are the behavior of a man who has learned, through painful experience, that authentic expression in his current environment carries consequences. I believe the reports of a marriage growing cold are not confections of a hostile tabloid press, but reflections of a reality that is becoming increasingly difficult to paper over with Netflix deals and lifestyle content. And I believe that Prince Harry is trapped. Not by bars or walls or any physical constraint, but by the most suffocating of all prisons, the prison of having publicly committed to a narrative from which retreat feels impossible. To leave Meghan now would be to validate every person he publicly dismissed, every institution he publicly attacked, every relationship he publicly torched. It would be to stand in the rubble of his own making and admit that the demolition was a mistake. That is an almost unbearable admission for any person to make. For a prince raised on duty and dignity, it may feel genuinely unsurvivable, so he stays, and he endures, and he appears in public looking like a man who is very, very tired. And the world watches and the commentators comment, and the clock ticks toward 2028. The monarchy, as I said, will survive all of this. Institutions built across centuries of genuine turbulence do not crumble, because one prince made a catastrophic series of personal decisions, however spectacular those decisions were. King Charles is on the throne. William and Catherine are doing the quiet, unglamorous, absolutely essential work of preparing to serve. The institution will endure, but I find myself thinking less about the institution today and more about the individual. More about the boy who was photographed at 7 years old with his mother in the gardens of Kensington Palace, squinting into the summer sun with the uncomplicated happiness of a child who doesn't yet know what loss is. More about the young man in uniform who served in Helmand Province because he genuinely believed in something larger than himself. More about the prince who stood in front of injured veterans and told them that their wounds did not define their limits, and meant every single word, that person is still in there somewhere. Underneath the California lifestyle and the carefully worded statements and the Netflix appearances and the years of accumulated damage, that person still exists. And the question that keeps me awake, the question that I suspect many of you share, is whether he will find his way back to himself before it is too late. Before 2028 arrives with its divorce papers and its book deal and its financial settlements and its final definitive proof that he was never the love story, he was the ladder, and the ladder has served its purpose. And ladders, when you have reached the height you were climbing toward, are folded up and stored away. The phone at Windsor, I hope, will ring. And I hope, when it does, that the people on the other end of that line will remember not the Harry who said those things and wrote those words and gave those interviews, but the Harry who walked behind his mother's coffin at 12 years old and broke all of our hearts without shedding a single public tear. Because here is the thesis I want to put to you today, and I want you to sit with it rather than immediately reacting to it. The thesis is this: what we have been witnessing for the past several years is not a love story that went wrong. It is not a brave couple standing against an oppressive institution. It is not even a particularly complicated celebrity drama. What we have been witnessing is a masterclass in personal brand construction, executed with a coldness and a precision that would command genuine admiration if it weren't so breathtakingly ruthless in its human cost. And the human cost has a name. The human cost has red hair and a slightly bewildered expression, and a posture that has, over the past several years, developed the distinctive curvature of a man who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. The human cost is Prince Harry. And the bill, by all credible indications, is about to come due. Let us talk about something that rarely gets the serious analytical attention it deserves. Let us talk about the concept of reputational arbitrage. Reputational arbitrage is not a term you will find in most relationship advice columns or royal commentary newsletters. It is a concept borrowed from the world of finance, and it describes a strategy of exploiting the gap between the perceived value of something and its actual market value in order to generate profit. In financial markets, you arbitrage by buying low in one market and selling high in another, exploiting inefficiencies in how value is assessed across different contexts. In the reputational sphere, and this is where it gets genuinely fascinating, you arbitrage by taking something that is undervalued in one context and repositioning it in a context where it commands premium value. Prince Harry, within the context of the British royal family, was, and I say this with genuine sympathy rather than cruelty, undervalued. He was the spare, the backup, the insurance policy. He was loved, certainly, and he had his own genuine achievements and his own devoted public, but within the hierarchy of the institution he was always second, always the supporting cast in someone else's story. In the American cultural context, however, particularly in the post-2016 cultural moment, where British aristocracy carried a peculiar romantic cachet, and where a narrative of a royal family member breaking free from an oppressive white institution resonated with extraordinary power, Prince Harry was not second. Prince Harry gold, not just gold. Prince Harry was a commodity so rare, so specific, so unreproducible that only one person in the world could ever possess access to it. And Meghan Markle, whatever else one might say about her, identified that arbitrage opportunity with the instincts of a seasoned market professional. She took a commodity that was being undervalued in its home market, transporting it to a market where its value was dramatically higher, and has been in the process of monetizing that repositioning ever since. The Netflix deal, the Spotify deal, the Oprah interview, the memoir, the lifestyle brand, the cooking show, each of these is a conversion event, a moment where the accumulated value of the royal connection, the royal wedding, the royal titles, and the royal grievance is converted into hard commercial currency. And Harry is the asset. Harry is what makes all of it possible. Harry is the reason any of it commands the prices it commands, the audiences it attracts, the cultural weight it carries. Without Harry, Meghan Markle is a moderately successful actress from a cable legal drama who had some interesting things to say about race and identity. Interesting, perhaps, commercially viable to a degree, but not Netflix deal viable, not $30 million book advance viable, not global cultural phenomenon viable. With Harry, she's something else entirely. With Harry, she's the woman who captured a prince, exposed a monarchy, and lived to tell the tale. The asset, in other words, is everything, which is precisely why the asset must be managed so carefully, which is precisely why the asset cannot be allowed to develop independent commercial viability, independent public identity, or independent support networks that might give him the confidence and the resources to walk away before the strategy has been fully executed. Now I want to talk about something that I think illuminates the current state of the Sussex marriage more clearly than any tabloid report or royal commentator's analysis. I want to talk about the pattern of Harry's public statements over the past 18 months. Watch closely. This is the right hand. When Harry speaks about Meghan in interviews, there is a quality to his language that is very specific and very telling. He does not speak about her the way a man speaks about a partner with whom he shares genuine intimacy and genuine mutual regard. He speaks about her the way a man speaks about a concept, about an ideal, about a version of a person that exists somewhere between memory and aspiration. He praises her in the abstract. He references her strength, her wisdom, her resilience. He uses language that is almost theological in its reverence. She is not described as a wife but as a revelation, not a partner but a transformation. And yet, and this is what is so striking when you notice it, he almost never says anything specific. He almost never references a shared moment, a private joke, a particular instance of intimacy or warmth or simple domestic happiness. The language is always elevated, always general. Always just slightly too perfect to feel real. Compare this to how William speaks about Catherine, in the rare moments when he does. There is specificity there. There is the slightly awkward warmth of a man referencing a real relationship with a real person who occasionally, like all real people, is probably maddening and wonderful in equal measure. It sounds like a marriage. Harry's language about Meghan sounds like a man reciting a text he has been given to memorize. Or worse, like a man trying desperately to convince himself that the words he is saying are still true. And the reports, again, from multiple sources, with enough consistency to constitute a pattern rather than a rumor, about the physical state of the marriage lend a particular weight to this observation. If the accounts of Meghan withdrawing physical intimacy are accurate, then Harry's publicly elevated language about his wife takes on a quality that is almost unbearably poignant. It is the language of a man trying to keep warm in a house that has gone cold. Let me tell you something about the mechanics of emotional manipulation that I think is crucial to understanding what Harry may be experiencing, if the pattern we have described is accurate. One of the most powerful tools available to someone engaged in the systematic management of another person is the strategic deployment of hope. Not consistent warmth. Consistent warmth would be satisfying, would be stabilizing, would give the targeted person the emotional security they need to function independently. No, what is far more effective is intermittent warmth, occasional warmth, unpredictable warmth, because the human brain, when conditioned to receive something it needs, approval, affection, intimacy, connection, on an unpredictable schedule, responds in a very specific and very well documented way. It becomes hypervigilant. It becomes laser-focused on identifying the conditions that produced the warmth previously, in the hope of recreating them. It becomes, in the truest sense of the word, addicted. This is not metaphor. The neurological mechanisms of intermittent reinforcement are virtually identical to the neurological mechanisms of substance addiction. The uncertainty itself becomes the hook. The possibility of warmth becomes more powerful than warmth itself, because possibility carries with it the exquisite, consuming, all-occupying urgency of not yet. If Meghan has been strategically withdrawing and occasionally restoring intimacy with Harry, and the reports suggest a pattern consistent with exactly this, then Harry's apparent inability to extricate himself from a marriage that, by objective external observation, appears to be making him visibly miserable is not weakness. It is not stupidity. It is not the inexplicable behavior of a man who cannot see what everyone else can see. It is the entirely predictable response of a person whose emotional reward system has been hijacked. He is not staying because he is naive. He is staying because leaving feels neurologically impossible. Now let us talk about California. Let us talk about why California matters enormously to understanding everything we have discussed today. California's community property laws are, from the perspective of a person planning a high-value divorce, almost uniquely advantageous. In California, assets accumulated during the course of a marriage are, with certain exceptions, considered jointly owned regardless of who earned them or whose name they are associated with. The division is presumed to be equal. The Sussex financial picture, while not entirely transparent, is known to include the Netflix deal, reported to be in the region of $100 million. The Spotify deal, which ultimately did not produce the expected content but still generated significant advance payments. Harry's memoir advance. Meghan's various commercial ventures. Real estate in Montecito. Various investments and assets accumulated since their departure from royal life. We are talking about a marital estate that, conservatively estimated, runs to well over $50 million, potentially considerably more, depending on valuations and undisclosed arrangements. Under California community property law, in the event of a divorce, Meghan would be entitled to a presumptive 50% of that estate. She would also have grounds to seek ongoing support, given the disparity in earning potential between a divorced duchess with a thriving independent brand and a divorced prince whose commercial viability is substantially dependent on his royal identity rather than any independently developed professional skill set. The children, Archie and Lilibet, would provide a permanent connection to Harry, and through Harry, a permanent connection to the House of Windsor that no divorce could sever. California family courts are generally oriented toward maximizing parental contact, but the practical realities of a high-conflict, transatlantic custody situation involving children with royal connections would inevitably favor the parent who is physically present in California, embedded in the local community, and demonstrably the more stable domestic presence. If Harry were to return to the United Kingdom, which is where every natural instinct he possesses presumably pulls him, the custody implications would be severe. He would become the visiting parent, the absent father, and that framing in the court of public opinion as much as in the court of law would be devastating. The California residency is not, I would suggest to you, an accident of geography. It is a strategic position. It is a carefully chosen legal and cultural terrain that the alleged 10-year plan culminates in: marry in 2018, build in California, divorce in California in 2028. The elegance of it, if you can bring yourself to see it as such, is really quite something. I want to spend a moment on the memoir question, because I think it is perhaps the most under-examined element of this entire saga. Spare was on its surface Harry's book, his voice, his memories, his account of his life. And yet the book that emerged from that premise was a document so perfectly calibrated to serve Meghan's interests, and so frequently damaging to Harry's own, that it invites a question that few mainstream outlets have been willing to ask directly. Who is this book actually written for? Consider what Spare accomplished. It irrevocably destroyed Harry's relationship with William. It severely damaged his relationship with his father. It made reconciliation with the institution essentially impossible. It burned the last remaining bridges between Harry and the family that, in the event of a marriage breakdown, might represent his only genuine refuge. It ensured that Harry, post-divorce, would have nowhere to go and no one to go back to. And simultaneously, it positioned Meghan in every passage where she appears as the calm, wise, supportive, long-suffering partner. She never loses her temper. She never behaves badly. She exists in the pages of her husband's memoir as a kind of secular saint, present to witness Harry's struggles, supportive of his decisions, the one constant in a world of institutional cruelty. If you were constructing a divorce narrative, if you were writing the first chapter of the story that would be told when the marriage ended, you could not write a better setup than Spare. Harry has publicly established himself as damaged, volatile, grievance-laden, and estranged from every support structure. Meghan has been established, through his own words, as the patient victim of his chaos as much as anyone else's. The book in this reading is not a memoir. It is a legal document in narrative form. It is Exhibit A in a divorce proceeding that has not yet been filed, and Harry, in writing it, or in permitting it to be written in his name, may have handed his wife the most powerful weapon in her arsenal without ever fully understanding what he was doing. I do not enjoy saying any of this. I want to be clear about that. There is nothing pleasurable in examining the probable suffering of a real human being, whatever one thinks of the decisions that led him to his current circumstances. Harry is not a fictional character. He is a person. A flawed, complicated, sometimes maddening person who has made choices that have hurt people and institutions that deserved better, but a person nonetheless. And the thing about people, even people who have behaved badly, even people who have made choices that warrant criticism, is that they are capable of suffering. And Harry, by every observable measure, is suffering. The institution he was born into will close ranks and carry on. The family he estranged himself from will maintain their dignity and their silence and their long view. The country he insulted will shrug and move on, because countries have short memories for royal embarrassments and long memories for royal service. But Harry will wake up one morning, perhaps in 2028, perhaps before, and the house in Montecito will be quieter than usual. And the woman who told him that she was the only person who truly understood him, who truly saw him, who truly loved him for exactly who he was, she will be somewhere else, building her brand, giving her interviews, working with her publisher on the manuscript that turns his suffering into her salvation, and he will be left with the accounting. The full, final accounting of what he traded and what he received in return, his family, his country, his identity, his friendships, his reputation, his dignity. All of it exchanged for a marriage that, if the evidence before us is to be taken seriously, may have been constructed around a timeline and a business model rather than a genuine and mutual love. The magic trick, when it is finally revealed, never feels like magic anymore. It just feels like being fooled. And the more spectacular the illusion was, the more complete and the more crushing the feeling of having been fooled tends to be. Prince Harry was shown the most spectacular illusion of his generation, a love that promised healing, belonging, understanding, and escape from everything that had wounded him. It was beautiful. It was perfectly tailored to every vulnerability he carried. It arrived at precisely the moment in his life when he was most susceptible to it. And the people who tried to warn him, his family, his friends, the quiet voices of people who had known him for decades and recognized something that concerned them, those people were systematically removed from his life before their concerns could take root. That is not an accident. That is a method. The clock is ticking. The brand is building. The legal terrain is prepared. And somewhere in a beautifully appointed study in Montecito, California, the outline of a memoir that has not yet been announced, that the world does not yet know is coming, that will arrive like a detonation in the wake of a divorce that will be framed as liberation, is already taking shape. And Prince Harry, the boy who only ever wanted to be loved for himself rather than his title, may be the last person on earth to know that it is coming. I hope someone tells him. I hope someone who knew him before all of this, someone whose number is still in his phone even if he hasn't dialed it in years, reaches out. Not to say I told you so, not to score points in a family argument that has lasted far too long, but simply to say we are here when you are ready. We are here because the institution will survive Meghan Markle. The monarchy always survives. But I am less certain, on the evidence of everything before us today, that Harry will survive Meghan Markle without help. And help for a man this thoroughly isolated can only come from the people who knew him before the trick began. The right hand, as I said at the beginning, is where the real action is.